All right, just so we can keep an eye out for the rest of the semester because of that snow week and everything else, we're going to be it's going to be over quicker than we think it is. Okay, so this is this week. The 13th is today. So we have a couple more weeks in February. We basically have March and April. We still have to fit in the rest of those assignments in that time. At times it might seem like there's a lot of overlap, which obviously there's going to be, but it is what it is. So we'll just keep moving with it, okay? Monday I'm going to start going over the planning process for the next assignment, which is going to be a hologram assignment. So that's what I'll start on Monday. Today I'm going to go over the text animator stuff. This one is going to be due on February 25th, which gives you basically today if you start it, and then 3 more days. And Monday I'm going to start the planning, like I said, for the hologram. And then we'll basically have the 25th is where we start the hologram. So if you plan on there's 3 text animators, if you do 1 text animator a class period, that should give you plenty of time to get those things done before the next assignment hits, okay? And just like the current assignment, the more planning you do ahead of time, the easier it is once you actually get into After Effects and do your work. So the main purpose of this one is that we want to look at different ways to animate text. This will come obviously very importantly when we get into the hologram assignment. There will be text. We want to see different ways we can utilize text tools. When we get into our social awareness one at the end, same thing. We have a lot of text that we'll be animating. So we want to see all different ways that we can do that. Anytime you're telling a story, this will be very important as to how we animate text and utilize just words basically to get that. We'll have 3 basic gists of how we're going to do this. The first one is going to be animating words manually. The second one will be using the animate button in After Effects to do the work for us. And then the third one will be using a stroke to animate a piece of text coming in, okay? And these are typically the 3 ways that text gets animated inside of After Effects. All of these will have a very consistent flow to them. There will be no text at the beginning, and then the text will somehow come onto the screen. We will make sure that it is spell checked. Somebody went through last semester and did their entire thing, and one of their words was spelled wrong, and then that caused them to do like an extra hour and a half's worth of work to go back and fix and correct and do whatever else. Make sure you choose your background and colors wisely. And then each piece now, especially now, should start to have that finished look to them. Now that we've gone through and understand more of the basics about how to choose colors, how things should look with vignettes and some of that, we can really start to kind of push that a little bit further as we get into these. I'll show more examples, obviously, but you should start looking at adding vignettes to things, color adjustments, shadows, or anything else that you might think would add to the completeness of this assignment. This is one of those things where if you do a good job at this, this could be a portfolio piece that you would drop into your portfolio. We will turn in the artwork for this, meaning all of that sheet that I said that you're going to fill out of here is my quote, and then here's all the drawings for each one of these. Your turn-in will be only the latest file and any assets, and obviously your movie will also be turned in. Same thing as the page transitions, you will have a title bumper at the beginning, and then your 3 text assignments. Now with this one, you will do your page transition, or your title card, a page transition, your first piece of text, a page transition, your second piece of text, a page transition, your last piece of text, and then a page transition, and it goes away, okay? When I go over this video, I'm not going to show how to put that together because you have to start putting the pieces together. You have to be able to say, okay, how did we do it in the last assignment? How should I do it for this one? And then utilizing the stuff you already know to do those things and make them work. Our end result will be 960 by 540 at 30 frames per second, and it'll be worth 8 points. Make sure you put the your name in the your name area. Okay, and as always, this will be up in the purple folder. It's for you to make a copy of. Okay, so the first step in this process, like I said before, is to go out and grab a movie that you want to use. So I went and grabbed, Winter AM title. Nope. Text animators. Movies. So I grabbed 3 movies, or 3 sections of a movie from Coming to America. Which one am I using? This one. Hold on. I have so many audio devices, apparently it doesn't like to play anything. Why'd you? Oh, I put the wrong thing. There we go. There we go.
Team?
I have recently been placed in charge of garbage. Do you have any that requires disposal?
No, it's totally empty.
Well, when it fills up, don't be afraid to call me. I'll come take it out most urgently.
This is the line I picked right after she talks.
No.
When you think of garbage, think of Akeem.
So that's my quote, okay? So I need to take this, I need to process it so that I can get it ready to be brought in. So I went into Audition, and it's going to ask me to re-pick my things. I'm going to make sure my audio is set to my headphone jack, yes. I can bring in this movie right into Audition. It won't show the movie, but it will show the audio for the movie, and then I can go through this and find it, just like I showed on the previous one, and just extract that one area out. So I believe it's right about here-ish. What? Let's try that audio hardware again. No, I said headphones. Yes. Okay. Headphones are plugged in, yes. This is... You typically won't have this problem, but because I have my other stuff plugged in, it's giving me issues. Speakers? Let's try speakers to see. No. Headphones is the correct thing. Headphones, headphones, headphones. All right, well, temporarily we'll just use it on my other one.
Well, when it fills up, don't be afraid to call me. I'll come take it out most urgently.
That's good to know.
All right.
When you think of garbage, think of Akeem.
There we go. So there's the line. So I'm going to go to Edit Crop. You want to leave a little bit of space before the quote and a little bit after. If for some reason it's noisy, let's say you picked a staticky one, it sounds horrible, it's best just to try to find a clean version of it or skip the quote and go on to something else. Don't try to spend a half hour in here cleaning it up. You can do some stuff, but it's not magic. Like there's a little bit of noise right here at the very beginning. If I zoom in, I can barely see some stuff. It's not noticeable enough. If it was that noisy where, you know, it's actually on, let me crank this up so you can hear it better. If it was like that in the background the entire time, I would definitely want this to be a lot cleaner. This is a pretty clean version of this. So I would save this as a WAV file, and I'm going to put that into my audio folder. So I duplicated my project folder, my movies in the movie folder, my audio will go into the audio folder. Coming to America Garbage is what I called it. I hit save. Okay, I'm going to close Audition. And now I have the audio clip. Now I need to create the artwork of what it's going to look like. So my next step was then to go into Illustrator and lay out where my text is going to be. Because it was a pretty simple graphic or simple quote, I wanted to add a graphic to this. So I drew a picture of Akeem. There's his name tag. You can see Akeem. And then I also have a garbage bag behind him right there. Everything that I'm going to be animating separately is going to be on separate layers. Each one of these words is on a separate layer, okay? Because each one of these words will be animated separately. The way that I did that, if you're unfamiliar with Illustrator, which you shouldn't be terribly, hi, hello, Mom. All right, so I have a piece of text. If you want to do it the hard way, you can literally type each piece of text on a separate layer. That's the hard way to do it. Typically, you want to go through, format what you want your text to look like. Let's just say for this one, I want that to be bold, and this to be some other font like that. There we go. It's like really creepy. There we go. All right, so I want that to be on 2 separate layers. So I would go to Type, and then I would go to Create Outlines. And now each one of these pieces is on a separate thing. So then I'd be able to, let me lock my other layer so I don't ruin those. Grab all of these, ungroup it, and then grab all just the mom word, group those, make a new layer, drag the mom group into the new layer, and call that mom. Take the word hello, group that, make a new layer, put that into that one, and call it hello. And then delete layer 13. Oops. Okay, so now this is on one layer, this is on another layer. So now I have complete control of those 2 things separately. If I wanted to animate each letter coming in separately, I would also be able to do that. The other alternative is that if you wanted to, you could actually lay it out in Illustrator, very similar to what we did with our title card, and then retype it inside of After Effects 1 word at a time. That's a possibility as well, okay? However you want to do that, that's up to you. The idea here is we need to have control over each one of these words. With Akeem, he is all one layer. I'm not doing anything fancy with him. He is just going to be one graphic image that's going to slide down. Same thing with the garbage bag, okay? So all the stuff is separated into layers. Even the background is a separate layer. You can see all the different things. I have the word of 2, and of 1. Right, there we go. So I just save this as a regular Illustrator file. And then I'm going to go into After Effects. So I'm going to import my stuff from Illustrator. Here, artwork, and bring this. Now when I bring anything from Illustrator that I want to use, I have to go down to Import As and say Composition Retain Layer Size. And what that will do is it'll make sure that when I bring in those pieces of text that Illustrator doesn't, or After Effects doesn't think that the layer is this big, even though the text is only that big, okay? If I don't check that box or choose this option, it will make it that big. So Composition Retain Layer Sizes, I hit Import. It brings this in, which is a composition, and then it brings this in, which is all the individual layers. So this is the time before you go any further is to double check your stuff. Oh, I should have mentioned also, the composition size, just like our previous one, when I made my new composition, I made it I actually made it double, okay? If you make it 960 by 540, that's a fine size, it works. Typically I like to go double in case I need to tweak anything later. I'll typically go 1920 by 1080, okay? But 960 by 540 is fine. When you bring this in, you'll see that it comes in at the exact size pretty much that you need, okay? Exact position. So here's my when, here's you. Oops, don't stretch it out. Here's think. Okay, now because I brought mine in at a double size, I had to go to New Composition, make it 960 by 540. I gave it 30 frames. I gave it a duration of 12 seconds. Where are you at? There it is. And then I had to go down and rescale everything back to fit and reposition every single one of those pieces, okay? So if you start off in Illustrator, everything is 960 by 540. When you go into After Effects, everything will automatically be 960 by 540, okay? And you'll see it automatically came in at 1920 by 1080 for me, because that's what my Illustrator file was, all right? So at this point, it's simply a matter of how you want to animate your stuff. On this specific one, I'm going to change it to the 960 by 540. So I'm going to go to my comp settings. Oops, I'm going to go to a new composition. Because I want mine to be that 960, I'm going to drop this down. I'm going to scale it to 50%. Okay, that's the correct size. This is not layered. Everything is flattened out right now. And then I'm either going to retype my stuff, or I'm just going to drag these down and just relay it out. Grab all the assets, hit scale, go to 50%. There we go. And then I'm going to turn this background off for a second because I don't need to see that. And then I'm just going to organize my stuff. So this is my Akeem here. I just put him into that position. Here is Akeem the word. I drop this over on top of the word Akeem. Okay, and I just keep going through the same process of relaying each one of these pieces out. Here's my garbage bag itself right there. Layer 4 is a nothing layer. I can delete that. Here's of. There's the other one. Doesn't take terribly a long time to do this, especially if you have a shorter word or a shorter sentence. There we go. All right, cool. So now I can delete that bottom one, turn my background layer back on, and then drop this below the very bottom. All right, so I'm going to verify everything is still lined up right. I don't have to throw a guide here. I can just kind of move this so it's lined up there. It's lined up there. Yep, okay, that's good. Okay, and now I'm just going to go through and bring in the audio for this. So I double click. I find my audio. Coming to America garbage, there it is. And then I drop this down. Now this quote happens very quickly. So when I hit play, I'm just going to hit the period on the numeric keypad. And After Effects is doing the same thing that the other one was doing, not playing nice. Let's go back to audio hardware. That's the bottom one, headphones, because I had my Bluetooth hooked up to it.
Think of Akeem.
There we go. Now it's crazy loud. There we go.
When you think of garbage, think of Akeem.
Okay, so there's my quote. Now this happens, you can see it's like 3.5 seconds. If I'm going to animate these things so that someone can actually read it, I have to be very wise about how I'm animating this. I can't do anything really fancy with it. I can't have the text spin into frame and then drop, and then spin into frame and drop. I need to have these things just like literally just come into frame, okay? So I'm going to have these just drop into place. That's what I'm going to be doing. So I'm going to order these so that it makes a little bit more sense. So when you, and then here's my first think, here's my first of, here's, now I have to differentiate between the word garbage and the other one. So I'm going to hit enter and say garbage image. And then this is my Akeem image. There we go. So garbage will go here. Think of Akeem. And then my garbage image will happen right after garbage. There we go. Okay. I don't want to animate these going from the first frame to the last frame. What I want to do is start off where they're going to be. This is their end position. This is like where they're going to all end up. So it doesn't make sense for me to, let's say, take the word when off the screen, set a keyframe, and then have to move it back into position. It makes more sense to set the keyframe here and then go back and set where I want to start from, okay? So I'm going to go to, let's say, I don't know, 15 frames. I'm going to go to the position of these. I'm going to take these basically as a one line at a time. So when you will be my first line. I set keyframes for these. I go back to the beginning, and then I pull them off screen. Okay. I'm going to grab these. I'm going to do my easy ease. I'm going to go to my graph editor. Make sure I'm in the speed graph. And give it a little bit of speed. Okay. I haven't looked at the audio yet as far as where these are going to come in. I know that they need to come in fast. I know I'll need to adjust it. I'm just setting keyframes so that I have a starting point to go with. I know that you will probably be after it, and it happens again pretty quick. So I'm probably just going to scoot this over maybe 4 frames. We'll see what happens. All right, so now I'm going to go and open up my audio. So I hit L twice. And you'll see there's nothing that happens here at the beginning, which is fine. And then the when you, it happens like right here. So if I hit the period, okay, you can definitely see right there. When you, these 2 peaks is when you. So I'm going to drag these into it. Now, there is no magic spot for look at the graph and put your things lined up here. You have to hit play and see if the 2 things connect the way that they should connect. If we hear him say when you and then 5 frames later when and you pop in, that's too long. If we see the words when you come in and then 5 frames later he says it, that's wrong. We have to have a very distinct connection between those 2 things. If you ever watch movies on like channel 20 on Saturday afternoon, typically the audio is horrible and you'll see it. It's off like 3 frames or something and you're like, something doesn't feel right about it. Same thing here. So I'm going to focus it just on this area. So I'm going to hit the N key so I can focus just on that. I'll hit the play button.
When you think of God, when you think of God.
Okay, so what do we think so far?
When you think of God, when you think of.
What was that? Yeah, so I need to make the text happen a bit sooner, and I think it probably happens a bit too slow, right? As far as how fast he's talking, that needs to happen a lot quicker. So I'm going to hit you. Look at how, this is when you. So he says 2 words right here. Look how far apart my keys are. So I'm just going to drag these a lot closer together like that. I'm going to push this a little bit further, push this a little bit further. Okay, only a little bit, like a couple frames, and then we'll see what happens.
When you think of God, when you think of God.
That feels better, right? It's a bit quicker. It feels like he's saying when you, the same time that when and you are hitting in those frames. So when and you are done. All right, so now we'll go down to think of garbage, because that's the next line. Notice I haven't hidden any of these other ones. I haven't done anything with them. They're just on the screen. I'm just not paying attention to them. So this is going to be the same process. I'm going to go to my positions. I'm going to set a keyframe. I'm going to go back to the beginning, and I'm going to move it. Now, thinking about this one, when and you pop down, I don't want to cross my letters. I don't want to have more words flow on top of these letters because it'll be very distracting. So what could I do instead of that? What was that? I could put a track mat, right? And just have it come out from like behind it. Now, for each one of these words, that would be a separate track mat, right? So we don't want to have a separate track mat for each word. What I want to have is one mat that I can use, okay? So that's what we're going to do. So I'm going to move it basically up here. So that's where when and you are. If I move it here, let me scoot these down so I can see where when and you are. When you, there we go. So I'm going to scoot this down and make sure that it shows up pretty much right at there. So a little bit higher. There we go. Okay, so it's starting basically in the same spot as when and you. So now I need to create a track mat for this. Now, the way that I'm going to animate this is that when you comes out from the top, think of garbage comes out from this track mat that's hidden, and then when it says think of Akeem, when you think of garbage, that's going to go away, okay? So I'm going to make one mask, one track mat that I can use for all those pieces of text, okay? So I'm going to go to my solid here, or my shape layer, make sure nothing is clicked, and I'm just going to draw my shape right inside here. Make sure it's obviously big enough to fit all the text. There we go. Cool. So we're not paying attention to the text at the moment. All we're doing is looking at how this is animating into it. So right now the whole piece of text just kind of goes right into that box. Let me make sure that I have no stroke on the box and I have a fill on the box of whatever color. There we go. Okay. So before, if we were to do a track mat, let me jump to a different layer or a different comp so we can see this. I would have a shape. I would have some text. And I would want the text basically to come out of the box, right? That's what we wanted. That's what we did before. So it would start, let's say, here, and it would go out like that. Okay? When we do a track matte, we turn the switches and modes on. We pull this below it, and we set the text to use the track matte of the layer above it. So now when it comes out, it's going to be invisible. So then I would say, okay, let's invert that. So now when it comes out, we see it. Now in order for this to work, each piece of text would have to have the same layer above it so that it would track matte each one of those. That's a huge hassle. That's a lot more layers. Imagine you had an entire composition of text. It would have to do all that. So what we're going to do instead, let me get rid of this, turn this back on, is we're going to use what's called a matte. Okay? So this is a track matte. We're just going to say set the matte. And so under channel set matte, make sure I have the text selected. There we go. Under channel set matte, I can pick a layer and say this is going to be that transparency for it. Okay, so grab your transparency from this area. So I'm on the text, I did a set matte. I'm going to say take the matte from layer 1, and you'll see that it made it disappear. I'm going to turn layer 1's visibility off, and now we'll watch it, and we'll see how it does pretty much the same thing. There it is. Okay, I just have to go in here and invert it in order for it to work correctly, just like it did before. Now this is really neat because we could literally assign any layer to be a track matte anywhere in that. It doesn't matter if it's above it or below it or whatever, it can still be that track matte. Now there is an issue that we're going to have. I'm going to grab one of these words here. I'm going to copy it and just paste it into this one. And I'm just going to get rid of the keyframes on it and just do this, manually. So when I use the word think, I'm going to put it right here where the box is. There it is. And I'm going to go to that same track matte or same set matte. Make sure I pick that same layer, and you'll see we get these kind of like weird results. Okay? The way that it interprets a piece of vector artwork from Illustrator is different than the way it treats text. So when we do a set matte on this Illustrator artwork, it just does that. Okay? All we have to do is click one button and it'll work. So I'm going to go to toggle switches and modes, and this button right here, that collapse transformation / continuously rasterize, when I click that, then it works. Okay? So now if I grab that piece of text, I can bring it in or out of that box and control where the visibility of it is. So that's what we're going to do. So let's just delete this comp 2 because that will confuse me later. There we go. All right. So I'm going to go to think. I'm going to go to effect. Just make sure I'm on think. Say set matte. Make sure I've chosen that shape layer, which I'm going to rename and call this matte. That way I know what it's called. I'm going to make sure that I have my continuously rasterize on each of these, and I'm going to turn the visibility of that matte off. So now when it goes in, it's invisible, and when it comes out, it's visible. Okay, now think is the only one that's working because think is currently the only one that has the set matte on it. So now I'm going to copy the set matte and paste it onto paste it onto garbage. So now when they go in, they disappear, and when they go here, they come out. Okay, so now I can do all the rest of that stuff. It doesn't matter really when you do it, you just have to do it at some point. That's this. Speed's going to happen at the end. Okay, so now I can start lining up where that piece of text happens. So I believe we said when and you happen pretty close to the beginning of this, right? Like when you is right there. So let's see where think of garbage comes in. It's probably right here.
You think of garbage.
Okay, think of garbage is right there. And it's actually, you can see the peaks right there. So I'm going to do the same thing. Put my little cursor here. Put this about there. Put the cursor about here. Put that about there. Put the cursor here. Put that about there. Okay, so now again, we'll just see if this works.
Garbage. When you think of garbage. When you think of garbage.
All right, that looks like it's pretty good already.
Think of Aki. When you think of garbage, think of Aki.
Cool, so that works. Now it does look like we have this like weird flicker right here as the text is coming down. Once motion blur is on, we won't see that. It'll just blur itself down, so we're not concerned about that. I may need to make it a little bit longer, we'll see, but for now we're just kind of placeholding it just to see if it works. All right, so when you think of garbage, boom, boom, boom. And then let's scoot this over a little bit more. Okay, so I need more time. I want it to say, when you think of garbage, and the garbage bag falls down, and then there's like a 3-5 frame pause, and then it'll say, think of Akeem. If I don't have that pause there, it'll flow way too fast. It'll say, when you think of garbage, think of Akeem, and all this stuff is flying around and people can't read it. So I'm going to go to my text layer. Can you see inside this text layer probably where he has the pause between the two phrases, right, where that dip is? That's where I'm going to cut it. So I'm just going to go here to the lowest part of that dip. I'm going to Control-Shift-X. I think that's the hotkey. That was not the hotkey. That was the wrong hotkey. Hold on. What hotkey do I want? Control-Shift-S. That's what I thought it said. Oh, D. Control-Shift-D. Too many pieces of software. Wait. Screen draw. That was a hotkey in my other software. Maybe that's why it didn't work. Yep, there we go. I'm just going to go up here to Edit Split Layer. That's a hotkey in my recording software to bring something else up. Cool. So that splits the layer. Now I can scoot this over. All right. So it says, when you think of garbage, and then the garbage bag is going to fall at this point. I'm going to go to my garbage bag, which is here. Go to the position of it. Bring this down. It'll actually be like right about there. Oops. And I'm just going to set a position. Now, before I set any keyframes, I'm going to think about what kind of animation I want to happen on this. I don't want it simply to fall. That's kind of boring. Every animation we do, there should be some element of fun to it, okay, or interest. So one thing I can do is that as it falls, I can add a little bit of a squash deformer, okay, so it actually like feels like it's stretching and squashing. To test that out, I'm going to hit S. I'm going to unlock my chain here and see what this is going to do. So that would give me a pretty good like squash and stretch. I don't want it to stretch from here though. Like that's a weird spot to be squashing from, is the middle of it. If it's going to squash, it's going to hit the ground and squash from the bottom. So I hit my hotkey to get to this one, which is the Y key. I move my pivot down here to the bottom, which is the Control key. And now when I stretch, you'll see that it's going to go from that area, so that as it lands, it's going to squash and kind of bounce. So now I can set my keys. So I will set my end key first, push that down there because that's where it's going to be, and then set the start of this, which will be way up here, and then see what that looks like. I need a little bit more speed here, so let's go obviously to Easy Ease. Let's go to this. Notice all these are the speeds at the end because I want it to be fast at the end, because that's how this animation is going to move.
When you think of garbage.
I think it needs to happen a bit quicker.
When you think of garbage.
There we go, that's good. Now I need to add the squashing. So I get the position done first, then I go to my scale and I set that up. So this is going to be set up pretty simple. I'm going to go right before the last keyframe and stretch this out. So this comes up, this goes in. Anytime you do a squashing and stretching, the outsides go in and the one side will go up or down or whatever it is. Okay, so that's going to be like that. When it hits the ground, here, the next frame, it's going to go the other way. So here and there. And then like a frame later, it'll be back to 50 and 50. Okay, I don't need any easy ease on this. There's only literally 4 frames of animation right there. Easy ease isn't going to do anything because there's not enough time for the easy ease to do anything. Okay, so now let's take a look and see what that looks like.
Think of garbage.
There we go.
When you think of garbage.
You can see the little bit. It's just like a
Think of garbage.
literally 4 frames of animation will make this a bit better of an animation altogether. Okay. So that works perfect. I may want to adjust this maybe back a frame or so, but I can tweak all that stuff after. Cool. So I'm happy with the way that looks. Now I'll go to the next line. Think of Akeem. So it says when you think of garbage, this is when it comes down. Like I said, a couple frame hold here, and then that next line of text will come in. right there. And the same thing, I'm going to go to the positions of these. I'm going to scoot these down so they start about there. And then I'll scoot these up so that they're in that word, think of garbage. Just like I had the other one come out of a track mat, I'm going to have these come out of the same track mat, okay? So, there we go. This is probably way too long. Based on the spacing of these keyframes, you can see how tight those are. Those have to be probably about the same because he doesn't change his speed at which he's talking. And you'll see too, like I'm not even concerned at this point about where the keyframes are at. I know what the keyframes should look like, and I'm just kind of like, okay, I'm going to set all my keyframes and then position them where I need them. It makes your life a lot easier because I'm not focusing on just the one. Okay, think of, okay. All right, let's just see if that works, and then, actually, let's look at the audio. So I'm going to hide this one. Double L on that one. So probably the same thing. Think is right there. That's pretty close. And then of maybe, yeah, that's probably there. Yeah, let's just see what that works.
When you think of garbage, think of Akeem. When you think of garbage, think of Akeem.
That's actually pretty perfect, right? All right, cool. So I don't want the think of garbage, you know, to have the text on top of it. Thinking of are fine because it actually comes right out of it, but Akeem is not. So I may actually keep of and think there, and then just do the track mat to the other one. I'm going to again copy the same set mat, go to Akeem, paste it in there, and this time I'm going to invert it, and then make sure that I click that button.
Think of Akeem. When you think of garbage, think of Akeem. When you think of garbage, think of Akeem.
That's good.
When you think of garbage, think of Akeem.
That's all we're going to be doing today is thinking of Akeem. All right, cool. So now I'm going to do the Akeem image, which is right here. Some things to kind of look for as you start animating things is what are the values of the stuff that you have. So here's the garbage image is 736 by 440. Here's the Akeem image, 736 by 296. So if these things are pretty close to each other, you might be able to just take keyframes from this one and then just paste them onto this one. Okay, maybe not, because it went down too far. So, oops, I forgot to move his anchor point, that's why. So I'm also going to have Akeem squished a little bit too. There we go. So now 736, 440, 736, 440, that's exact. Now I paste the keyframes, and now you'll see it falls right into the same place. Awesome. And then I could even go to the scale of that garbage image and copy it. Go to the scale of this one. I might need to adjust it. I'm fine with that, and I'll just set it there. Okay, so let's see what happens.
When you think of garbage, think of Akeem.
Okay, so obviously I have to do something with that garbage bag. So what's going to happen is when you think of Akeem, that garbage bag goes away at the same time that Akeem is falling down. So I'm going to go into about here, go to my garbage images position, set a diamond, scooch up a little bit, and scoot it off the frame. There we go.
When you think of garbage, think of Akeem. When you think of garbage, think of Akeem.
There we go. Okay, so that's essentially the process of it. Now, I'm going to jump to my actual finished one, which is this one. And you'll see all my layers are nice and neat. All my keyframes are there. Here's my motion blur on it.
When you think of garbage, think of Akeem.
I also added, let me just scoot that over so we can see this as a bigger picture here. You'll see that when and you go away as well.
When you think of garbage, think of Akeem.
And then he has that little glint in his eye, right? Like that. Okay, so all of these were done same way, track mat. So there's one track mat right here. And the when and you are just going to be animated into the track mat to hide. And then the think of garbage are into the track mat to be visible. And then think of a keyframe is into the track mat to be invisible and out of the track mat to be there. Okay, so I thought that was a nicer way to kind of display it. I also kind of relined up some of my stuff. When this is here, the garbage bag, when you think of garbage, those pieces of text kind of fit nicely where they're at visually, okay? But when I dropped in a keyframe here, I wanted to make sure the bottom of him was lined up with the bottom of the text. So I did go back and tweak that because I wanted to make sure these things still visually fit, okay? At one point, I got rid of the think of garbage, and it said when you think of a keyframe, and it didn't make sense. That's why I got rid of the when you think of a keyframe, okay? I could have left all of it on there. When you think of garbage, think of a keyframe. Obviously, the garbage bag would have to go, so that's gone. Now, a couple things I added to this on top of the animation. Number one, I added a little bit of a drop shadow to each piece of text. So you can see it's going to pull the text out a little bit more, so it's not going to be so staticky, boring on the screen. If I get rid of that, oh, this is you. Let's go back to here where you is actually on the screen. There it is. So you can see the difference between you being on the screen and when being on the screen. Adding just a little bit of a drop shadow adds a little bit of attraction to pull it out some more, okay? And for all of these kinds of things, if I have something that's repetitive, same exact settings, I'm going to set it up on one, copy it, and paste it to all the other ones. I'm not going to grab everything, assign it, then go through each one and try to set it up individually. It's way too much time. So I did that. On the very top of this, I have it says green solid. What I did was I added, let me jump back to my example here. I added a green solid, but then I added a generate, I added a gradient ramp, and I changed this to a radial ramp. For now, I'm going to leave it as this. Well, I'll show the radial ramp just so you can see it. There's two handles here. Okay, I'm making a vignette. Dark in one area, light in the other. Typically, it's going to be reversed, so I would say swap. I'm going to see what linear does. This might be kind of a neat way to do it too. We'll just see. Okay, you can pick different colors there. I'm going to hit my switches and modes, set this to multiply, and now we get this gradation that goes down the side of the image. I could again, of course, move this so that I control where that gradation happens, maybe like that, or maybe I go back to that radial ramp and control where these are at. There we go. So that's more of a vignette like that. I'm going to pull this out a little bit more so it's a little bit softer. Good. Okay, so that's one of the things I did to it. I also added a little bit of a blur to it. I'm going to turn this Gaussian blur off. So on the gradient, I typically will add a little bit of ramp scatter. Sometimes when you do a gradient and you convert it into a movie, you'll get what's called banding. So you'll see like here's black, here's dark gray, here's medium gray, here's light gray, and here's white, just as an exaggeration. If you add some noise to it, that breaks it up and you don't get the banding. But this looks kind of ugly, so then I add a little bit of blur to help soften that effect. Okay, and this is just a Gaussian blur turned up enough so that I don't see all that pixelization. So I added that onto mine. I also did an adjustment layer, so remember layer, new adjustment layer. And then I added a couple different things. So let's go to where we can see a keyframe in here, right there. Turn these off. So these are just subtle things that I added. So one of them was a toner. Let me turn this transparency back, or opacity back up. Okay. The projector is going to show it off too much. But basically, I just kind of added a little bit more toning to this. Can't see a single thing happening now. All right. Well, apparently this isn't doing anything, so just delete that. I added curves to this just to kind of punch some of the colors a little bit more. It was looking a bit washed out here, so I punched them. And then I added a hue and saturation. Not too, like the curves maybe went a little bit too far, and then this kind of softens it a bit more. So I think with the other one, I think it looked better with all three of those in there. There we go. Okay. And then the very, very last thing that I did was I didn't like the position of everything in here. If I go back to this comp, where was it? Yeah, it just looked like there was a little bit too little space here and too much space there. and maybe too much space here and too little space there. It's subtle, but it's there. So I added a null. I'll do it on this one. I added a null object, and then I parented all of the things to it that needed to move. So my green solid, which is my vignette, doesn't need to move. That just stays exactly where it is. My matte needs to move. All of my pieces of text need to move. My background doesn't need to move. So I just went here to the parent and say, you're part of the null. And my null I just renamed to be Reposition. And that's all I did, was just use this as a way to reposition my graphics, okay? If I were to go and manually move each one, that screws up the keyframes. I have to go back and redo it all. So I was able just to kind of nudge this over just a smidge, and then maybe pull this up just a smidge. If something were to pop through the bottom, yes, I'd have to go back and set a keyframe, but it's minimal compared to everything else, okay? And then the last thing that I did here was that bling. I'm going to go into my twinkle comp, and this is what it looks like. Oops. It's just at the beginning. I want to play the whole thing. Okay, so all this is, I showed you, I think on the last one, how we can use a line or a path and then use that trim path to animate it, right? So if I go to my pen tool here and I add some stroke to this, I'll make it thick so it's easy to see. I go to my trim path, and what I need to do is I want to basically animate it doing that and then doing that. Okay, so that's what it does. I just say, okay, start off at zeros. I move these back to the beginning so it starts at the beginning. Come on, there we go. Set the end to 100, scooch up a little bit, set this start to 100, and you'll get this thing that looks like that. Okay, let me just solo this so we only see the one. Now, based on where these are at, position-wise, how fast they are, or how close they are together, you'll get different speeds of that motion. So these ones are pretty tight. If I look at where these are at, they're right there, and they're speed graphed. I believe like that. There we go. Cool. And then all I did from here was I just set the position or the anchor point to be right at the center of where I wanted these to rotate from. I duplicated it several times and then just gave them each kind of like their own little rotation. I literally just typed in like some random numbers and then adjusted from there. There we go. And then a little bit of offset, scoochy, scoochy, scoochy. Go. Okay, and then throw motion blur on this, shrink the size down to something manageable. These are also mine were original ones were shorter. And that one's way too far out. There we go. Cool. So that's it. So that I just made a composition, dropped it onto my movie, and then added that little bling sound effect, which I thought would be a lot easier to find. Oops. And it was not. I actually had to find a chiming sound effect and then use Audition to crop out just what I wanted. Oops, that's not the right one. There it is.
When you think of garbage, think of Akeem.
Okay. Now, this whole process works with any piece of text that you're going to do. Here's another one.
What are you doing in my swamp?
Right? Same exact thing. All the words are there. In this one, again, I brought them in from Illustrator as pieces of text. This one I did a little bit different because I did still do the drop shadow, but I did a lot of effects on top of the text. So you can see like each piece of text has this like texture to it. So I added a texturize node. I found a picture of this kind of like gravelly thing, and I just pick that picture, and then I can adjust the light direction of the picture. I don't know which word I'm on what. And I pick the contrast to adjust what that looked like. And then you get this kind of neat texture on top of what you've already done. And then the rest of this is just animating things out. what starts here, so I'm animating the scale of it to come up. And then when R comes in, then what has to move? So I'm animating scale at first, then position, and then the R is coming up with scale, and then its position moves, then the U comes up with scale, and then it moves, and that's all it is. I think there's also rotation on these two. Yeah, position, scale, and rotation. A lot more keyframes in this one just because of how they're set up. Because what is the first word, and every new word moves the other words around to a different spot, it's still the same exact thing. There's no difference in what we're doing, okay? Okay. Now I also added that same little squashing thing that I did on the garbage bags where it stretches out, it squashes, and then comes back. I did the same thing here on the text, except I didn't do it just in one direction and then the other direction. It does it in both, so it just flexes basically. So every time like a word comes up, I'm going to go down to where it says swamp, because that's the biggest one. Okay? You'll see that it scales up, not to where it's supposed to stop, but it scales up past where it's supposed to go, and then settles into where it's actually at. Okay? So if you're trying to get that kind of effect, that's what you're doing. Now this takes patience, it takes time to make sure everything is synced up. All of my keyframes, as that word swamp comes in, you can see that's when everything is kind of moving out of the way. Okay? So it's the same thing, just adding those to it. This one has the vignette too. I believe on this one, I just added the vignette to the back. Okay, so the vignette's not on the words in this one. The vignette's on the entire thing because it's on this top layer. In this one, the vignette is just on that back area. If I moved it to the very top, I believe it just kind of like darkened my words a bit too much, and I didn't like that, so I kept it back there. Here's another one. This one goes into more advanced stuff. We'll eventually get into this kind of thing. This one doesn't have a piece of text to it. It's just animated like this. So this one I've broken it up into not only just words, but also pieces of the words, right? So other is broken up, and then hello is broken up as well. This is also using After Effects 2.5D, which allows us to rotate stuff so it looks like it's actually in 3D. Again, we'll get more into these things, but for right now, we're not there, okay? But again, the concepts are still the same. Also notice that each one of these pieces look like a finished piece. This looks like a finished piece. This looks like a finished piece. This one looks like a finished piece. This does not look like a finished piece. It's very boring, very bland. The background is a solid color, which isn't always bad, but typically you want to have some sort of coloration or lighting simulation on top of it, okay? Cool. I think that's it for this first one, okay? This one should take you typically about 3 hours, maybe 4 hours to do, just the After Effects part, just to get it locked down. If you do more graphic stuff, that's going to take you more time to do it, especially if you don't have the strong Illustrator skills. So just keep that in mind as you're working on it. This is today's. Monday I'll go over another one, a different kind of animator, the second one. And then Wednesday I'll go over the third way to animate. And then we'll go from there, okay? Questions on this one? No. All right.